Welcome back to the Zero E Michigan podcast. I'm Carl Bloss, and my co-host is.
Larry Hudson.
So today we have with us an EV expert, Ken Mol. He's one of the regulars at the West Michigan EV community, comes to a ton of events, always there for us, coming through, showing his vehicles. So Ken, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Ken Mol. I actually purchased my first electric vehicle as a 2013 Nissan Leaf. I purchased that 4 years ago. And when I purchased it, it only had a 50-mile range. And I was, taking it back and forth to work in the summer. And then I realized in the wintertime, I'm like, I'm going to have to charge when I get to school. And luckily, I had a parent who actually had lived just off the corner. And I was able to charge at their house to get back home, realizing, this probably isn't the best situation. So I looked into getting myself a newer Leaf. And this was right in the middle of the pandemic, right when they started letting people get out of their homes. I was able to buy a 2018 Nissan Leaf, and I still have it today, and I absolutely love it. And my battery health is right around 80%, so I still get about 120 miles if I'm driving 55. So
Very cool.
A little bit about myself. I am a kindergarten teacher, and I teach up in Greenville.
Yeah, we've had conversations because my daughter's a teacher now, a French teacher, so are sharing tips. So I'm glad you're out there teaching the kids because we need people like you.
And we always, whenever we got this little tech session that we have with one of our units in English and reading, and so one of them is about driving electric vehicles, and I get pretty pumped about that. Letting the kids know that I've got one. They think it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. So the reason I asked Ken here today is I recently had a chance to give an EV 101 talk to a group of KOA campground managers. And, and I tried to explain a little bit about how EVs work, what the charging looks like. And campgrounds are kind of a special case because a lot of them already have high power outlets at their location. So we started seeing on a tool like PlugShare that people can actually filter for the NEMA 1450 plug, the 50 amp RV plug, and the TT30 is there. And so as part of the discussion, one of the things I heard was that the power requirements for campers themselves has already been going up to the point where they're struggling with the amount of power that they can bring to each site. And now you add EVs into the mixture, and suddenly we start running a little bit short on power. And I wanted to start the conversation a little bit from the EV driver's perspective. Like, why is this even a thing? So Ken, can you explain a little bit about, what is it about EVs and charging at campgrounds?
Well, there's two big things. For me personally, it has to do with the expense. There are some people who, when they go camping, they go to a campsite and they pull in their camper and they sit and they stay there, and they don't really go anywhere. Campers like myself, they only use the camper kind of as a base camp, and they are on vacation and they're sightseeing, so they're driving around. They're not staying stationary, and so it would make sense, to have your camper there, and then of course bring your EV along with you. In my particular case, I have a F350 that I use for hauling the camper. I also have an Armada that I use sometimes for hauling it, but then to drive, the Armada or the F350, it gets expensive, driving around, gas prices and everything. So we usually have my wife follow us, and we usually only are about maybe 100 to 200 miles away from our home whenever we're camping here in Michigan. And we sightsee, we go places. And so for us, having the charging option for our EV at the campground is essential. And we seek out places that have 50 amp hookup just because of that.
So explain to us a little bit how that works. And for those that are watching the video, behind me is actually a picture of a typical campground box that has both the 50 amp and the 30 amp plug. And this actually shows my Nissan Leaf plugged in. So when I drove that vehicle from Missouri to Michigan, when I first moved to Michigan, back in 2018, there weren't very many charging stations. And so I had to resort to a couple of campgrounds that were actually listed on PlugShare, and you could pay the campground a little bit of money for the use of the electricity. And then, during the day, and get your charge, whatever you needed to get to the next station, and then move on. So, Ken,
You
explain to
said
us.
a little bit of money. What is the
Well, that depends. I mean, that's a little bit what we need to talk about today, I think,
Hmm.
is um, a lot of campground owners don't understand electricity. And I don't want, I don't want to sound um, pedantic or anything. A lot of them do, but when you start talking about EVs and what an EV can pull and how much that's going to cost them, they're probably a little bit underinformed, and that's kind of what I want to address today. So Ken, maybe explain to us how this works. Like, how do you charge a car off of a campground pedestal?
Well, the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is first, when you're at the campground, you have usually a 50 amp hookup. If you're having an EV, that's generally what you're going to go. Now you don't have to. You can go to one that has only a 30 amp, but just know if you are going to any spot that only has 30 amp, you're providing that, if you have a travel trailer or a fifth wheel or something like that that has a 30 amp plug, you're not going to be able to utilize as much electricity in your whatever you're sleeping in, so in your camper or anything, if you are using that, because you have to share that electricity that you're using. Otherwise you're going to pop the breaker. And so it's important to know that um, if you do plan on driving a lot and want faster charging, you definitely want to find a 50 amp um, box at the campsite. And usually what I do is I actually purchase. I'll show you one of the things I purchased. I actually keep this at my in-laws because my father-in-law, he actually just bought a Bolt. He traded his Volt in and got a Bolt. So we have this, and actually I'm at my in-laws at the moment in my camper, and this is how we share. So he has a 50 amp NEMA 15 plug in his garage, and we split it. So this plugs in, and then I've got two spots here. One for
So,
the
so
EV.
right off the bat, you have to do a little bit of power management with that, right? So,
Yes.
because that's a 50 amp circuit. And for those not familiar, when you're charging anything or you're using on a continuous basis, and EV charging is considered that, right off the bat, the NEC says that you should only load that circuit up to 80% of its capacity. So you should
That's
only
correct.
load it up to 40 amps if that's all you're drawing. But now what you're doing, you've got a Y splitter there. Now you're
Mm-hmm.
going to two different devices, two campers or a camper and an EV and that sort of thing, right? So that's
That is
already
correct.
something you have to consider.
Yes. I mean, if you were planning on just having, you know, level one charging, I would suggest plugging into the box. So there's generally, if you have only 30 amp and you don't have the 50 amp option, you would just plug your camper into the 30, and then I've never seen this. I've never seen a 30 amp and not a 20 amp standard, house plug
Yeah.
there. So yeah, you can see it right in this picture. He's got all
Yeah.
three.
So the 30
50.
amp is in the middle in this picture, and then your 20 amp, just a regular outlet, is there. Now this one also has the 50 amp, but even at the 30 amp sites, you're going to have this one and this one. This one's also called the TT30. Maybe one
That's
other thing to
correct.
point out is when we talk about amps, we also have to talk about the volts. So
Hmm.
the NEMA 1450, the 50 amp runs at 240 volts.
That is
Okay.
correct.
And the TT30 runs at 120 volts. So whenever you're talking about power, you got to multiply the two. So watts is volts times amps, approximately, in the AC alternating current space. So a TT30, 30 amp times 120, it's 3,600 watts max, right? And then you're already
Hmm.
talking about 80%. Whereas the NEMA 1450, 50 amps times 240 comes 9,600 watts, right? So almost 10 kilowatts. So
So See, that's why we got Carl here. He can do that math like that.
Well, you're a teacher.
That's right. That's right. Kindergarten.
Yeah. Well, you need to start
But
early.
anyway, so we have options, you know. But when you don't have that 50 amp option, you are going to only be able to charge with a level 1. Now, the nice thing is that I mean, if you can purchase, I got one of these fancy dancy little adapters. And this is the reason why I purchased this, is that if there is something wrong with the 20 amp, and because I actually carry 2 different chargers in my car at all time when I'm camping. So I have my level 1 charger that came with my vehicle, and then I also have a level 1/level 2 charger that is a portable one. And I say level 1/level 2 because you can alter it. You can have it as a 120 volt, or you can have it as a 240 and get that level 2 capability.
So it auto
And
adjusts, right? It'll
auto
sense the voltage and then give you the power accordingly.
not quite auto adjust with mine. Mine you have to
Okay.
toggle. So before you
Okay.
plug in, I actually have to hit a button and toggle it. So you have to kind of know where,
Okay.
you know, what you want to draw off of.
It depends on your equipment then, because I have one that auto
Definitely.
adjusts. So yeah, you got to know
Yep.
your
So
equipment.
exactly. So when you are purchasing one, if you want one that auto adjusts, definitely, you know, look into that. The one that I have, I only paid like right around $200 for. I think the ones that auto adjust are a little, you know, a little bit more than that. So but I bought this just because, you know, if I wanted to like, let's say the 120 volt plug, if there's something wrong with it, you know, or if there's shorting or something, you know, it's always nice to have something as a backup. So this is my backup. I'm going to be honest, I've only have used this twice, but I've used it twice.
Yeah.
So
what you're showing there, for those that can't see the video, that's a TT30 male to the NEMA 1450 female adapter.
That is correct. So this goes into my my level 1/2 portable charger. I would not use this for my level 1 charger that comes with the car. If you only are wanting to pull 120 with your, you know, and trickle charge, and you're just kind of, you know, going here and there, I would say just get a smaller adapter. You want to make sure adapter for the 120 volt 20 amp plug that you have, you want to get a small extension cord. And the one thing you want to definitely do if you get that small extension cord is make sure you have either a 90-degree or a 45-degree angled plug, because of the shield that comes up and down that protects all the plugs from the weather. You want to get one of these because then it easily can pop down and not get bent or, you know, kind of damage the wires. So that's why I have one of these. And I do suggest getting a higher gauge. This one is
you want to
actually
make sure it's rated for that power draw. So
exactly.
a level 1 charger, typically they're rated for 15 amp circuit. So again, with the 80% rule, they're going to draw 12 amps at 120 volts. So it's about 1.4 kilowatts. So call it 1500 watts. So it's got to be rated for at least 1500 watts.
Exactly. So, you know, I use this for when I'm this little adapter for when I'm using my level 1. But the majority of the time when I am camping, like I said, I specifically seek out campsites that have the 50 amp because I want ample power to level 2 charge my car and enough power to power up the majority of the things that I have within my camper. Now, with that said, there's a cap, you know, 50 amps. That's everything that's inside of that box. Because it's all being shared. So your 120 that's on there is being shared between. So you got your two 120s, your 30 amp 120 and your 20 amp 120, and then you have your 50 amp 240. All of that power is being shared, okay, with that box. So with that being said, you're not going to be able to really go much beyond that 50 without popping a breaker here or there. So that's why when you have the splitter, what I specifically do with my manually buttoned level 2 charger is instead of having it up to like the 48, mine is actually, I think it's 36 is my max on mine. I don't have it at 36. I have mine tapered down to 16. So I specifically set it at 16 so then I'm only pulling in 3.3 kilowatts into my car at a time, per hour. So that will allow me to have enough electricity to operate the majority of my high-end electronics that are inside of my travel trailer. For example, if you can see, I've got my little fireplace going. I've done this and I've been able to have the fireplace on high.
And that fireplace is not just ornamental. I mean, it's not a real flame, but at the same time, it is a heater, right? So you're drawing a good amount of power to run that thing. And are you using that in lieu of like using propane, right? So it actually keeps the place warm.
And most campers or travel trailers, any of the camping devices that are out there, or camping vehicles that are out there, they are moving toward more electrification. All of them. If you go to any of the shows, anything that's newer, I'd say back in 2016 when I got my first travel trailer, there was still a lot of stuff that required propane, like the refrigerator, only operated off of the propane. It didn't have the fireplace. I'm going to be honest, most travel trailers nowadays, you're not going to see one without a fireplace.
And air conditioners. So when it's warm out, you're not using that, but you're using maybe even multiple air conditioners, right?
That is correct. So some of the larger travel trailers, like fifth wheels, or the travel trailers that have the bunkhouse, or even the travel trailers that have the
toy haulers.
That's the word I'm looking for. The toy haulers. So they usually have more than one air conditioner, just because their pure size, the small, they just can't handle it. So, and you can toggle them on and off, or you can have it full blast. But at the end of the day, whatever it is that you're drawing from your camping experience, you only have 50 amps. That's really the maximum that you can be having.
Can you run both air conditioners on 50 amps, or are the fifth wheel guys or the big toy hauler guys are actually taxing that 50 amp? They can pop that breaker.
I'm assuming they're taxing it. I'm not the electricians and I've never owned one, but I'm assuming that each one's probably at a lower level that would allow that to happen. Because you're right. If they had everything operating inside, they had, because even the water heaters are electric. Our water heater in here is electric. The air conditioners, if you had more than one, they would have to be tapered down a little bit. It probably at half power, but just because the sheer size of some of these camping vehicles, they're huge. Some of them are just massive, and they have to have. You can't kind of spread that cool air around with just the circulation system. You'd have to have them in two different, or some sort of split system.
Is there a world where you go to a camping spot and it would have two 50 amp services for you, or we're not there yet?
I have not seen that personally. That might be down the road, maybe with campgrounds that are brand new, just being made, that's very possible. But I went to one that was actually just made up in Mount Pleasant, and I didn't see that when I was looking at the boxes. And it was a fairly new campground.
And 50 amp is the max, right? There is an 80 amp plug, 60 amp plug.
I've never seen one.
Carl?
Yeah, I mean, there is such a thing as a NEMA 1460. But beyond that, also in the EV world, typically anything above 50 amps, you're hardwiring. So that's not something that you do for camping, right? You don't plug into that. You don't go in and like hardwire your camper before you get set up, unless you're a seasonal or something. And one of the things I'm hearing you say is, so we have all these devices that are on all the time, like an air conditioner, and but then on top of that, you get up in the morning, you're making your coffee. It's like, boom, there's another 1,000 watts, right? And you pop something in the microwave. Well, there's another 1,500 watts. So, I mean, I think it's very easy to overload these circuits. And that's also the vibe that I was getting from the folks at the KOA meeting, is that, even EVs aside, these huge campers that are coming in now, they've electrified everything. And they're already struggling with the power levels required to feed multiple of these. So now you're at 4th of July weekend. The campground is completely full. It's 95 degrees out. So everybody's running their air conditioner. They got all their lights on. They got a big screen TV going outside. So they're already struggling with power. And now along come folks that have an EV that say, well, I have all this stuff, and now I want to use my Nissan Leaf, or whatever my towed car is. I want to plug that in, and I want to use my running around car, and now I'm going to plug in and pull another 40 amps. And I think that's where they're struggling a little bit. And so now let's talk about cost. That's something Larry wanted to talk about. So the campground, typically you're just paying a flat fee for the night or for the week or however long you're staying. I have seen some campgrounds that have counters on the kilowatt hour counters on the boxes. So you got charged for the campsite and you got charged for the electricity. But I've only seen that out west. And I'm wondering if you've seen anything like that, or like, what do you think is fair at this point? Because that's not something that a campground typically has budgeted for. They're going to assume you come in, okay, you're going to load up, the electricity with your camper, but now comes the EV and you're saying, well, I'm getting it for free, but somebody's paying for it. So how do we do this fairly?
So to kind of get over the whole thing of fairness, you also got to think about what's being used. So remember, like I said earlier, you are capped at 50. You can choose, if you're using a splitter, to operate your EV not at full level 2. I mean, you could, if you wanted to have your EV and that's the only thing that you're charging, you'd have to have basically just the lights on in your travel trailer. You couldn't have the air conditioning on. You couldn't turn on, you couldn't have the hot water heater. That's usually what I turn off, is the hot water heater in my travel trailer. I couldn't have the heater or the air conditioner. I couldn't have all that high stuff running if I wanted to level 2 charge at the max, at full level 2 capacity. So with my splitter, like I said, I dial it down with my manually operated level 2 charger. So I have it at half the wattage that I can usually pull out of it. And what that allows me to do is that allows me to usually operate one other large drawing device within my camper. And I usually have that as the air conditioning, especially in the summertime, because, and if I need to use the if I want hot water, I'll have that using the propane, or I'll turn the car off to charge. So it's a juggling act. I usually, like I said, I usually keep the water heater off and just use propane if I need that. And even the microwave, if I need to use the microwave, then I'll turn the air conditioner off. It's kind of a hassle. It is. But like I said, the big thing is that most of the time when I'm out there camping, I'm getting back at night. I can open up, the doors if it's cooler, and I don't have to run the air conditioner. I can run other things. So it is a juggling act. I'm not going to lie, but that's the choice that I'm making with the 50 amps that I'm purchasing with my location. I'm buying full access to that 50 amps.
So that's kind of that's your message, essentially, that, hey, I'm paying for this site, including all of the electricity that you've included with this.
Exactly. Okay. And with that being said, if, I can use my electricity however I want. You can use your electricity however you want. You have a fifth wheel, and it's, running at its max. It's got all the air conditioners going. You've got the hot water heater. You got the, the microwave going. You've got all the entertainment stuff. It's all on. You're using right around 50. And, even with these big campers, if the system can't handle, or even if they have older circuit breakers on the box, this happens a lot. The older circuit breakers will pop, and they'll have to get out, and they'll have to adjust. That's very common.
Or, if you're lucky, they pop. If you're unlucky, they don't pop, and you're actually overheating wiring or melting plugs and things like that.
That would be bad. So just, you got to be alert to those different things. Just
is that a common thing to melt plugs and wires? I don't remember.
From what the KOA folks are telling me, they see an awful lot more of that now than they have in the past. And I think part of the reason is now I don't know campground standards. So if somebody here does, put it in the comments. But my understanding, what I heard was for every let's say 200 amp service, I'm probably getting this wrong. For every 200 amp service, they were saying they service 5 or 6 campsites. So right off the bat, if you do that math, it doesn't work, right? If you have 50 amp circuits, if you have 6 50 amp circuits, that's 300 amps. So you're going to overload that circuit. And the idea is, of course, that not everybody is drawing the maximum amount of power. Go to your home power panel, and I have a 200 amp panel, but if I add up all of the individual circuits, if I add the amp numbers, I come out with more than 200 amps because that's the way they're designed. There is a design standard for that because the assumption is you are not loading up all of your circuits at 100%. But I think what we're starting to see is we're pushing. Campgrounds are starting to load those up. And so their design standards then have to change to meet that. And, the question that we have in the EV community is that a fair thing to ask for? What are your thoughts?
I would say my biggest thing is, with any change of infrastructure, you're changing with the time. So when you have people that want these amenities with EV aside, I'm not even talking about EVs at all. EVs aside, you have people that want their amenities when they're camping. When they're, people purchase travel trailers and all these larger camping vehicles, and some people, that's their livelihood. They're living on the road. That is their home. They want their amenities. And, so if the campground is not giving them or not willing to, change or upgrade to make that available, usually what ends up happening is the customer will go to somebody who is. So, the nice thing about campgrounds is they're everywhere. We have lots of different opportunities. Of course, every campground is going to be slightly different, but
4th of July, they're all full. So at some point you don't have many options anymore.
That's right. And so if you're talking about specifically weekends are definitely, and that's the big thing with campgrounds is if you most people only know of campground life with weekends, because that's usually when most people are able to get away. But if you actually look at the majority of the campgrounds out there, there's plenty of space Monday through Friday. They're usually only half full. A lot of them are only like about a third at capacity. They're basically empty during the week. Most campgrounds, unless they're the state parks, so I feel like the state parks, they because they have certain draws to them because of the natural resources that they provide. A lot of times that they're pretty full in the middle of the week, but just with my own personal experience, most campgrounds are not even close to half capacity during the week, even during the summertime. And of course, in the fall and the early spring, they're basically empty for the most part all week. Maybe only operating at like 10% of capacity during the week.
So plan to drive on the weekend and hang out during the week.
Well, there you go. That's the thing is that if you, I would even say, hang out at the campground, if you're not charging, hang out at the campground on the weekend, so you're not drawing as much electricity, and then during the week, do all your travels. If you wanted to not overload the system or anything like that. But, but like I said, if you're not most, go ahead, Carl.
Well, so the next kind of logical step is if I'm a campground and I start seeing boxes melting and overloading circuits and people popping, the breakers of the larger boxes, things like that, and their energy bill starts to go up. And so at some point, and I've already heard of this happening, we had Gail and Devin Thorpe on where they pulled into a KOA site. And I don't want to throw KOA under the bus. This is probably all,
KOA is a great company.
Somebody came around to their campsite and said, no, you have to unplug your car. We don't allow that. So what do we say to that? How do we approach that conversation with campgrounds? I understand they're a business, right? They're there to make money. we don't want to take advantage of them. And just like, when we talk about taxes, road taxes for EVs, we want to pay our fair share. And in Michigan, we do. Just fun fact, right? We pay our $140 a month or a year on the tabs. So same kind of thing for the electricity. I think we don't want the campgrounds to go out of business because we want them to be there. So how do you think we can have an equitable solution to this for a campground that has overloaded circuits, and it's going to cost them thousands of dollars to upgrade their campsite? I mean, is there maybe another solution? Let me throw another out here before I get your answer. What I heard at the KOA meeting was, well, maybe we just need to run a separate line to a group of campsites and have EV chargers there, but then we're going to charge you a little bit extra for that amenity. Maybe you're going to have a J1772 plug. You don't even need to bring your own, charging cable. What do you think about a solution like that?
It doesn't bother me. The thing is that with the changing of just as we progress with EVs, we're going to see more and more of them. If you're not allowing people to charge their EVs at the campsite and only at those, select locations that they have at the gate, for example, they're going to be full. And then you're stuck with, I don't have a place to charge. And you have all these 50 amp plugs, that's where I'll give you an example. I'm going to give you a little story. This summer, I was going to a concert, a Lindsey Sterling concert up in Leelanau area. And I took my car because I'm like, I don't want to spend a ton of money and drive up there. And it was a nice day. But we did have some rain. And I had calculated out just the right amount to get up there. And
with your Leaf?
Well, it started to rain.
With your Leaf?
It rained a lot. My Nissan Leaf.
Okay.
Yep. So I was taking that up there. I had, stationed a couple different places. So my Leaf can only go about 120 miles. And so I had it planned out perfectly. Of course, we know with weather circumstances, weather can definitely inhibit the range of your vehicle. And in my case, I was starting to lose range because it was pouring. I mean, the rain was coming down. I was hydroplaning because it was just, there was a lot of rain. And I noticed that my range, I'm like, I told my wife, I said, there's no way I'm not going to make it. I have to find a campground. I have no choice. So I pulled into a campground, pouring rain, went up. I looked around to make sure that they actually had 50 amp, and they did. And they had one that was actually open. No one was occupying that site. I went in and I had told the ladies that were there, and like, hey, I'm in a jam. I'm away to go watch, a concert. I'm driving my EV. I wasn't anticipating the amount of rain or even, was it rain at all. And is there any way that I can charge for an hour to get the electricity that I need? And they're hesitant at first because, in this particular area of Michigan, they're not, they haven't had that many experiences with EVs. And so the big thing is that you got to come at it with positivity. Don't ever start conversations with people being upset, because that's just going to make things worse, and you're not going to get what you're trying to desire. But luckily, I told the ladies, I said, I'm more than happy to pay you, more than what I would normally pay for electricity just to, get the charge. And I paid them $10, which is way more money than I would ever, so that whole going up there actually ended up costing me a little bit more than what it would have. Still cheaper than gas though. But, I charged for an hour. I got what I needed, and I was on my way, and I educated them on it, and they thought it was kind of cool. But it was the positivity and the information. Yeah. And I just, the one thing I really hope that people that are getting into EVs, I hope they do educate themselves enough to at least know the amount of electricity that's being drawn, and that they can have these sort of conversations with campground, owners and even workers, just to let them know, like, hey, it's going to draw a little bit of power, but it would be the same amount as if it was, a camper in running their stuff. It wouldn't be that much. And $10, that's more than what they're paying, well more than what they're paying for their electricity.
Yeah, so it's a good idea to know a little bit how that math works, right? So for example, the 40 amps that you're going to get off of an EV charger, that's 10 kilowatts. So in 1 hour, 10 kilowatt hours, and if you pay, I don't know what their rate is, let's say it's 20 cents. So you're using $2
Right.
worth of electricity.
Exactly.
So if
You know what? You know what'd be cool, Carl? You know how you have that sheet that shows all the EVs you can buy
Mhm.
and the prices? It'd be cool to have a sheet that would show this is what a Nissan Leaf would pull. This is what a Volt. This is what a Tesla. This is what a Rivian. You know what I mean? And people could carry that and say, look,
Yeah, so of course it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? Because the EVSE itself is limited. So for example, if you pull in with a Lucid Air that could optimally pull 80 amps, so that's 19.2 kilowatts. But if you plug into one of these outlets with a 40 amp charger, then that's
You don't
what
get so
determines the rate. It's not going to overload the circuit, but the EVSE, what a lot of people call the charger, the charging cable, is what determines that. So
Mhm.
that, I don't know if that's really going to work by vehicle, but I think if you can kind of understand what the maximum is, like, again, if you're dealing with campgrounds, the maximum you're going to pull is 40 amps, 10 kilowatts. So that's easy because now you can multiply. Hey, what do you guys pay for electricity? You have any idea? Okay, I pay 14 cents at home. Maybe you guys pay 20. Maybe you pay
Mhm.
25. I don't know. But if it's 25 and I'm here for an hour, 10 kilowatts is $2.50. So that's the absolute max that I'm going to pay. And like Ken said, on my motorcycle, I carry $5 bills exactly for that. It's like, here, I'll pay you $5. And if they
Yeah.
say I want 10, I'm not going to argue with them, right? Because
Nope.
I want them to have the positive experience. I don't want them to feel like they're going to get ripped off by EV drivers. And
Bingo.
right.
I like what you said about approaching this with positivity. So I think we got to get out of this, electricity should be free. And I know there are people that take their EVs and they're always looking for the free charging spots, but free is unsustainable, right? Somebody is paying for it. So
Right.
in terms of the campgrounds, if we want to develop these positive relationships, we need to make them feel comfortable that we're, number one, we're not going to damage their equipment, and number two, that they're going to be whole at the end of this, and that they're a business, they got to make money, right? So and I think there are other business opportunities. I think maybe one of the things that you taught them, Ken, was that, hey, maybe we can make a few bucks, and maybe we can talk to them about, hey, list your site on PlugShare. If you think your
Exactly.
electrical infrastructure is up to this sort of thing, you can do that. Now, you mentioned something earlier about, all the EV charging spots might be filled up if the campsites put those in. So in Mackinaw City, the Mackinaw City KOA, they put in 4 J1772 plugs. They put in, I think 4 juice boxes. And I think what I heard them say, and if they're listening, correct me in the comments, that people come in and they're they're not really coming in off the street to charge there for an hour and then move along again, because level 2 charging is only going to give you 25, 30 miles of range in an hour.
Right.
So they were asking, like, well, should we put in a DC fast charger? And then the discussion went to, well, that's a whole other investment level that you would need to
Mhm.
do. To do that, you can do that, but maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe there are other ways that you can monetize this. Maybe tell people, come in and spend the afternoon here when the new batch of campers hasn't shown up yet, and I'm going to charge you, I don't know, some fee that they think is fair, where they're still going to make money. Charge for a little bit, and then, by the way, here's our pool, and here's our sundry store. Maybe you need a
Mhm.
snack, right? That sort of thing. Make a few more bucks. So, I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think there are other business opportunities?
I do, and the thing is that most of the larger campgrounds, they have amenities. They have bathroom, showers. If you're traveling, that's great because that's going to give you the things that you need. Pool, um, a lot of the different state campgrounds and park or county park campgrounds. Um, they have lots of different amenities for
Just
people,
access
and
to the
then
beach or something, or
yeah, access to the beach or anything, and then in even food, a lot of them have stores. So I mean, they have that stuff, and by being there, let them know that you're buying their stuff. you wouldn't normally be purchasing, or so if you're going to the store, or if you're needing it to charge or whatever, let them know that I came here and I charged and I spent $40 or 30, how much ever you spent doing other things. Whenever I charge not at home, I'm spending money. I don't know of a whole lot of people that don't, and that's one of the perks of allowing somebody to charge, is that you're getting residual finances from the person sitting there and having to wait to charge their vehicle, like especially level 2. Level 2, you're going to be there for a while, and most people are going to be there at least 3-4 hours.
So
Unless you're eating out,
Yeah, that's interesting. So I don't know, can a Leaf fast charge or
Yes.
supercharge?
Yes, it can. Uses shadow.
Would you pay extra to go over there so you could charge in 30 minutes instead of 3 hours? While you're camping, you're like, oh, I would have done that or no, you wouldn't. You would.
I'm going to be honest, I would not do it at a campground. Not with a DC fast charger. So if a campground is thinking about having DC fast charge, I'm going to be honest, probably not. Level 2 makes sense for campgrounds. It definitely does. But even beyond that, the expense of the level 2 charging infrastructure, if you have, I would say it's going to be in their best interest for any campground owner to provide 50 amp hookup at every single site, and make sure that your whole, because it's not, like I said, this isn't just an EV thing. This is a camping experience thing. It doesn't matter if I'm charging my car or if I'm enjoying my travel trailer or something.
But
the infrastructure.
But I think the thought process is still that a camper isn't going to pull the full 40 or 50 amps.
It can.
Well, it can, but it won't all the time. Whereas an EV
Not
definitely will. I mean, as long as you're charging. So, I mean, how would you feel about a campground saying, okay, well, here's our fee to camp, and if you're going to charge an EV, we request another $10 a night. It's kind of like like a pet fee at a hotel where they might have some extra cleanup or something like that. How do you feel about that?
It wouldn't deter me from that particular campground if I could do that, because even then it's like, it's going to be cheaper than driving my truck around. It just is, $10 a day versus, if let's say I had a larger battery capacity, if my next vehicle I'm hoping to get would probably be a Kia EV6. My wife sat in one. She's like, I love it. So maybe that'll be my next one. But let's say I had a Kia EV6, and I was trying to charge it, from 10 to full, because I'm traveling. So I want the full capacity. I'm filling that sucker up probably right around, I think those battery sizes are right around the 70 or 80, kilowatts. So it's like, I would want to make sure that I had that filled up. So yeah, I would want to make sure that I could charge that in charging at the campground. But that's why I said the best thing is to have that splitter to, make sure that if I have a travel trailer, that I could kind of pick and choose how I'm charging, have the car on half that, and then, the rest of the stuff in the camper, I can kind of choose what I want to have on and off.
Yeah. But I mean, you do have to know what you're doing. So
yes,
you have to understand a little bit about electricity, which is why for EV owners, I think it's also important to know how much does your vehicle draw, what is the onboard charger capability. My first Leaf, it was a 2012, had a 3.6 kilowatt onboard charger, but then the charging cable that I bought with it was, I think it was a 20 amp. So it was capable of almost 5 kilowatts. So you have to know these things a little bit. Otherwise, bad things can happen. You can overload circuits, and you can do damage, and then you're going to be liable for that. So yeah, it's good to know some of the basic math from that standpoint, from your usage, but also from the cost associated with it, so that you can have those conversations with campgrounds. We also see people doing Tesla camping, where they basically take it doesn't just have to be Tesla. It can be any vehicle. They go to a campground, they fold down the rear seats, you get a mattress, you sleep in it. That's kind of what you were doing when you're going to Lindsey Sterling, right? You were kind of car camping and at a campground and charging the car.
That's right. That's right. And it's funny because when I actually went, when I parked my vehicle, I didn't purchase I didn't purchase a place to park at the venue. Right across the street was a campground, and so I actually purchased a site to charge my car because it's like, why not? It's like, I'm not even there, but at least my car is charging, and and I had a spot and my car was in a safe location. So, I used a campsite for that. And I decided because
you were sleeping in your Leaf?
I did not. No, I actually had a tent with me. I was going to spend the night, but because of the weather, we decided just to drive back home that night. Especially with the family, it's just rain, 2 small kids, wife.
Tent, yeah.
That's why we have this. So we don't have to deal with rainy tents.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, too, I forgot to mention, they are starting to put battery packs in campers with motors so that it helps push. So there's going to be not only people charging the car, but their campers going to need to, I think the one that I saw was some guys that are from Tesla started a company, and it sounded like the battery was like the size of the F-150 Lightning battery. It's a big battery.
So 130 kilowatts. Kilowatt hours.
And it had assist motors. So that way, when you're pulling it with your Rivian or your F-150 Lightning or whatever, you're not running out of range. The camper's pushing itself.
Yep.
Yeah. So now you're having to buy 2 campsites with 2 plugs.
Yeah. Well, one of the previous episodes we did where Carl was talking about, like, we had a guy that bought the Hummer, and the Hummer and his Tesla Plaid were pulling so hard that the transfer, it wasn't even enough to have 200 amp service. The transformer on the pole couldn't handle it.
Yeah, wow. That's a whole other discussion. And that's where the campgrounds kind of get a little bit of heartburn, where they say, all this stuff coming in that's using electricity, and here we got to upgrade our infrastructure. And at some point, even when it's on the other side of the meter, when you're pulling more than what your service can handle, there's usually a financial obligation that happens from the customer to upgrade the infrastructure on the other side of the meter. So that is something that you have to look at. And by the way, this is the same thing for homes. If you decide that you're going to put in an 80 amp charger at your house, which requires a 100 amp circuit, even if your panel can handle it, at some point, if you're the one that overloads the local transformer, you need to have a discussion with your utility.
And how much was that, Carl? Is that like a $50,000?
It all depends, and I'm not going to speculate. I don't work in that group, but it's not cheap. It's definitely a 4 or 5 digit number.
Wow.
So with talking about, because Airstream is actually one of the other companies that's coming out with a travel trailer that has that battery pack, the assistive motion with the trailer. And so we've got our level of technology that we're getting right now, and there's a lot of technology that's coming, and it's we have the technology, but it's not readily out there yet. But the grid to I can't remember, Carl, you have to correct me on the vehicle to grid, but the back and forth, so allowing
bidirectional.
You have bidirectional, that's what I'm trying to say, the bidirectional charging, that actually would solve a lot of problems for these campgrounds, because if they were able to kind of just like I think of the Ludington water reservoir,
pump storage,
and actually asking, working as a battery pack. So basically everybody's, vehicles, and if everybody had an EV that had that capability, the campground would never really have to worry about it, because if everybody's using a lot of electricity all at once, it could help to relieve a lot of that just by having, less draw from the power company, just because it's already.
Oh, so you're saying that the J7072 plugs or whatever would actually pull a little bit just to get them over that hump at the peak.
What I'm saying is that the bidirectional charging allows the energy from your vehicle to go back into the grid to help whatever it is that whatever wants the electricity. So let's say the grid needs some electricity because it's not getting enough electricity from the power source. So whether it be windmills, solar, solar is a big one. You know, a lot of people talk about that. It's like having that bidirectional would be perfect for, you know, solar in particular, but, you know, even wind and anything. It helps to even out the grid by having that bidirectional capability. So that might be something that we'll eventually see
Yeah, I think we
more
have
in
to
the
figure that
future.
out. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think it's going to take a while, right? Because
It'll definitely take a
so
while.
so like
That's something 10, 20 years down the road.
yeah, so the Ford F-150 Lightning, for example, has that capability of the Ford Pro charger is actually a CCS charger. It's not the J1772. What Larry, what you were talking about. The J plug right now in its current incarnation is unidirectional. You can only flow into the vehicle. So CHAdeMO, fun fact, since you're a Leaf owner, was designed from day one to be bidirectional. And there, if you ever look at vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, vehicle to building pilots, they're often done with Nissan Leafs with the CHAdeMO. And CCS, my understanding is that there's no universal standard for bidirectional flow yet. There are companies doing it, Ford being one of those. They have that Pro charger, and then they have a transfer switch that you can buy. So, you know, Transport Evolved, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, she has an F-150 Lightning, and she had all that stuff put in. So we can put a link to that in the show notes. So it's not as seamless as it you know, as she had hoped. And it's a little bit expensive yet.
It's
expensive. And
then
the other thing, of course, you got to figure out is the people that are willing to dispense that energy back into the grid, they need to be compensated somehow, right? So then, you know, your meter needs to spin in both directions. And at home, you can do that. But how does that work in a campground if you're not even metering the electricity?
So going back to you had mentioned this a while back ago, and we kept going down another rabbit hole. But going back to the meters, so we do actually, most campgrounds, except for state parks and most county parks, they have most seasonal campgrounds. So if they have a seasonal section, most of them are metered, and so that's how they're going to be, you know, getting those people that are there all the time. They're getting their rates from that meter.
Okay. So then they also have an incentive to not squander that electricity, right? So
Exactly.
if you're paying a flat rate, you're like, hey, whatever, I'm going to do all my laundry. And also, I'm going to do it between 2 and 7 p.m. when the electricity is more expensive at home because I don't care. I'm paying for it, right? Unless, of course, you know,
you're paying $50 for a night, you know, for a day.
Right.
You know, that's
so
because that's for most campgrounds. KOAs, they're getting up there. Some of them I've seen as high as $80 a day.
I've
they're
paid
getting
that much out at near in the Black Hills. I can't remember the one, but yeah, they also charged you by the person. It was like there was a fee for the camper, for the size of the camper, for the type of electricity you were drawing, and how many people were there. And before I was done, we were paying like $90 for the site because there were two families and yada yada. Anyway, yeah, they can get up there. But again, they're businesses, they have to make money. I understand that. So that's something we have to be cognizant of.
Definitely. I'm going to throw this out there. This is a little tidbit for everybody that has watched this entire video. So there's this really cool campground. So if you're into camping and you want an absolutely fantastic place that has almost every single site has 50 amp, and it only costs $35 per night. It's right on Lake Michigan. So that's your perk. You're right on Lake Michigan. It's beautiful, green grass, trees, everything. But she's definitely designed for travel trailers. They have pit toilets and they don't have showers. So you have to have a camper of some kind for you to, be clean. But it's called Clay Banks. Clay Banks. And the thing is about this place, it's right on Lake Michigan, off the New Era exit. You go right straight out to right straight out to Lake Michigan and head south just a little bit once you hit Lake Michigan. I think Stony Lake is right there. And you just go south a little bit, you got Clay Banks Township Campground. It is wonderful. I mean, for the price and everything, that's where we've been staying, and absolutely love it there. The people are great. So I'm gonna give them a big shout out.
Awesome.
What city is that? What city is that close to?
It's just south of Silver Lake.
Between Stony Lake and Silver Lake, right? Is what you're saying.
So it's just south of Stony Lake. So the big city that most people are familiar with is Silver Lake. Silver Lake, it's very, very, very busy. Their campgrounds are inundated. It's hard to find a spot even during the week up there. So if you need a place that's, about 15 miles south of Silver Lake, Clay Banks, it's a hidden jewel. They don't even have it on directories for campgrounds. Like, I was shocked.
Wow.
I have about 4 or 5 different campground apps, and it's not on any of them. And so it's a hidden jewel. So for those of you who watched this, you're welcome.
Awesome. And
thank you for watching.
Send me some links, and we'll put that in the show notes and give them some more business.
Perfect.
Hopefully they want the additional business.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
All right. Any final thoughts, Ken, on camping and EVs?
Go camping with your EV. You'll love it. Trust me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it. And enjoy your camping experience. And we'll see you in a campground sometime.
Sounds good. You have a good night, Carl.
Thanks, guys.
To our listeners and watchers, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Don't forget to give the thumbs up and subscribe.
There you go. Thumbs up, subscribe. Appreciate it. If you enjoyed or learned from this episode of Zero E Michigan, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Visit our YouTube channel for other related videos at youtube.com/@0E-Michigan.